All right. So say when ready and we'll do it.
Yeah. Well, golly. Hi, Erica.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Erica. Hello, Erica. Hello. So,
I'm good. You know what? We're ready anytime. I
okay.
really didn't have much of an agenda other than the only thing I had for today was an intent. And
All right.
that intent is to share our
Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good indeed.
to share our insights, to answer questions that we might have, that I might have, Erica. And I'm really anxious to hear about Erica to share what being a spark is. So
Oh, yes.
Brilliant.
That has been a big topic lately for sure.
And a very magical one also. Yes.
oh
And you asked the question earlier, I think in group or in comments or something like that.
yeah, I did. That question, I knew I wrote it down. No, I did not. I was going to, and I did not. Well, heck on me. So that's okay. Basically, the question was unawareness. Is it an excuse, or is it an opportunity to give ourselves grace? And that question had come out of, I guess I was just thinking about, I found a quote in my book about, I was never a bad mom. I was just unaware. And I'm really thinking about that. It's like, oh, so how does that apply to me today? So that's kind of where I am. And that whole thing is about should, for me anyways. It comes down to should. A little bit of share here. My should stems, of course, all the way back to my early childhood and all the ways I was told I should be, do, and think. And like I had expressed yesterday, those shoulds left me with the impression that I was never going to be worthy of being loved or being a good person, because I had been told all these things that I should be that I believed I was not, or being told that I was not. And that stemmed over into my parenting as well. Believing after the fact, after all the trauma had ended years later, that I was a bad mom because of the way my children made their choices in their lives. And so I blamed myself for their choices, telling myself, well, I should have done more. Everything was should. So that's when I asked, are we making excuses for ourselves, or are we actually, is this an opportunity to give ourselves grace? And I loved your answer. So when you said it's choice, but how do we know that we've got that choice if we're not aware?
That was the point. Okay,
Yeah.
so hold on to that point.
Yeah.
Wait, I make it hard to find the group here. Point about how do we deal with unawareness, right?
Yes.
How do we become unaware when you are unaware? So how do you get out of an unawareness bubble, in other words, right?
Right. But if you add to that, and I guess I was thinking more from I think my mind was coming from that memory, that place of, what can bring us to awareness other than we know we've hit a threshold of we've had enough. Say we're in a survivor mode. How do we, as a survivor, as somebody who's trying to protect herself, protect her children, or it could even be a man, how do we get to that point that we are aware that we're unaware of these things, that should is driving our every effort to live? So yeah, that's why I'd asked that question about how do we become aware of what we're unaware of?
Very cool. All right, so I just want to say we are live. Brilliant. So for anybody joining, starting, this is going to be one of our main topics here, main focuses on how to be aware that we are unaware. And then magic and potency and awesomeness of spark and sparkness and being a spark and everything that involves spark. So This is very cool. This is very cool. And this is also going to be, you're going to use this as a podcast, right? Sure.
Yes, yes.
All right. Brilliant. Brilliant. So we're in full steam here. We're just very exciting. Everything working really well.
And I'm really hoping that people who will join us will drop in their questions so that we can get those answered. Now I can't see the Facebook portion of it, so Syl, I'm going to rely on you for that.
Yes. All right. All right. I shall monitor them and keep an eye on that. All right. So brilliant. So I've marked us as an announcement, and I'll pin us to the top.
Awesome.
And then I'll just comment and tell people, hey, come. Yeah, it takes a little while usually. So
yeah, it does.
Always come right away. Very cool. I'm very keen to hear Erica just on sparkness. So hang in there 1 second more. I just want to pin this and then make the comment, and then we get going. Very exciting, very exciting. What you been up to otherwise, Erica? You good? I'm assuming. And a chance to greet you fully. We just got started right away. So
I am great. I am doing lots of thinking, lots of making sense of things, and yeah, I'm doing great.
Well, you look beautiful as always, Miss Erica.
oh yes, fabulous.
Okay.
Is that part of the spark?
I think it is actually. I think it
Okay.
is. One of the things we talked about the other day with the spark was the concept of radiance,
Oh,
and that is something I've been thinking a lot about, and about how to embody radiance. Not only in your inner world and in your energy and your being, but also in your physicality as well. How do you translate radiance into that? And so I hope that is that is coming through. I've been thinking a lot about that.
Actually,
you are radiating very much so. Yep.
But
yep,
it,
yep.
Oh, good.
but it also begs a question for me. Is two questions actually popped into my head when you said the word embody, and knowing where my emphasis has been lately, because I have discovered how evil should has been in my life. So the other day I told myself, I want to feel better about myself. I want to feel better about my body and about how I look, my appearance, everything in my life. And to me, that means unhooking from should. And the only way that I think the outcome of that is going to be tapping in more into the feminine energy. So I'm excited to hear you speak on all that.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Are you ready?
Sure.
Let's go. Let's go.
Well, let's see. Where do I even start?
So Erica, just to start, maybe I'll just cue you, just since we're in that habit a little bit, and that would be useful, maybe, asking questions.
Sure.
Maybe just recap for sure what we've been discussing when it comes to this point, this conception, this understanding, this awareness, this newness, this moreness, which is all in that one word, spark.
Okay.
Right? So share the whole story.
The whole story. Okay. Well, we're in for a long haul.
Ah.
So let's see. I'm going to practice being concise and efficient in my retelling of this story, because it is a big story for me. But I guess let me start with something that I have struggled with historically for a lot of my life. I think in general has just been my sense of identity and my place in the world, how I fit, if I fit. I've always felt different, not in a good way, and spent a lot of time, speaking of should, I spent a great majority of my life operating from a place of should, based on what I perceived to be normal, to be good. A lot of it was what I thought goodness was. Um, and seeing an otherness in myself that I thought meant I was not good and that I needed to change or to hide or, somehow adjust myself. And a big part of the identity crisis that I was dealing with was I felt for a long time that there was an expectation, or really lots of expectations, placed on me about who I was supposed to be. I felt like everything in my life and everyone in my life was telling me, this is what is expected of you. You are supposed to be this person. You should be this way. And there was a lot of that identity that I didn't resonate with. I didn't want to be that person. I felt like so much of what I was supposed to be was, or what, not even necessarily what I was supposed to be, but what was almost fated for me to be, what I was going to be, whether I had a choice or say in it or not, was someone who was strong and powerful and this leader. And I developed this very unhealthy view of strength and power. I associated those concepts with ego. I thought someone who sought to be strong and powerful was someone who was trying to be superior, who wanted to be in charge and thought that they were really important, wanted to be important. And I really associated those concepts with ego. And it was something that I didn't want for myself. I did not want to be that person. And I felt that I didn't have a choice. I felt like everything was telling me, this is who you are, this is who you're going to be, so get on board or get off the train. And I really struggled with that for a long time. And um, to make a long part of this story short, one of the ways that I felt this identity was being placed on me was with my name. Um, the name Erica means strength, it means eternal ruler. And my mom has a really beautiful story about why she picked the name that she did. And I, there was a lot of intent placed on this name for me. And I appreciated that, but I felt very disconnected with my name for a very long time. I did not want that to be a part of my identity. And so something that Sil and I have actually talked about quite a bit was the importance of naming. We both share an affinity of sorts for names. I think we both like to name things. We feel like that gives reality to something when we name it. And so for me, my name was a really important part of my identity, and it bothered me that I didn't have a connection with it. And so I set an intent for myself recently to find a connection with my name. I've been working for a long time to find a more healthy understanding and perception of strength and power, and to redefine those things for myself, to find ways to make those appropriate for me and have that be an appropriate part of my identity, because both of those things I more or less completely disconnected with for a lot of my life, and that was detrimental to me for sure. And so I've been working a lot on trying to find a positive connection with those things, to redefine what strength and power can mean and how they can be appropriate. And so recently I decided I want to find a way to connect with my name in a way that it feels like mine and something that I can really have be an appropriate part of my identity. And I started thinking about names that I might give myself. If I were to choose a name for myself now, what would it be? And I was reminded of, I think when I was about 8, I went through an exercise in I was a campfire girl, and so so one of our I think it was one of the activities we did to earn a badge was to give ourselves a Native American name. And I gave myself the name Sparkling Stream. And I loved that name. I had this really specific vision of what that was, of the sun shining through the trees in the forest on this little stream and looking like fire on top of the water. And I really loved that name. I really connected with it. And so I brought that up with Sil. We were talking about it. We were talking about all of the interesting magical things that sparkling stream could mean and what that might entail and how I could connect to it. And we started talking about the concept of a spark and the idea of a spark being an initiator of sorts, an originator, a creative idea, concept, something different, something other, the formulation or suggestion of a new idea, of a new perception, and how a spark can be something that sort of appropriately helps others to make a change. And that basically you don't have to be the leader, the hero, the person who comes in and follows through on all these changes in order to be strong and powerful. You could also be just the spark that started this idea in motion. And I loved that idea. I really connected with it. And it has led to some really, really incredible and beautiful new understandings and beliefs for me about myself, about my place in the world, about my identity, about the world itself. It's been a really, really beautiful thing. But we talked about really kind of going back to the idea of the dandelion that I know you and I share, that
Yes.
a spark, something that Sil said that I loved. We were talking about radiance and the spark and its connection to radiance, to radiating goodness, light, positivity. And we were talking about the sun and, the sun radiating and the sun's radiance. And Sil said, okay, let me see if I can remember the gist of this. Um, does the sun or is the sun affected by the reception of its radiance?
Yes.
If someone perceives the sun's radiance or doesn't perceive it at all, or the way that they perceive it, does that affect the sun itself? Does it change the way it radiates? Does it change the sun? No. The sun is doing its thing. It is radiant, and its radiance falls where it will fall, and its identity, its being is not affected by how its radiance is received. And that was such a huge concept to me. And I see that in the dandelion as well, that for me, dandelions hold so much magic and beauty and moreness. They're one of my favorite flowers. And for me, one of the really special connectivities there is that the dandelion shines its beauty, its light, its joy on the world and in a world where so many people don't perceive it. So many people see this beautiful flower as a weed, as an annoyance, as something to be gotten rid of. But that doesn't change the dandelion. The dandelion still has the same intent. It still holds the same magic. It still has an intent to existence, an intent to radiance, an intent to be itself authentically.
Yeah.
And that's
Wow.
not affected by how people perceive it. And that to me is part of being the spark. Um, and that has helped me so much in visualizing my goodness in being me, not what the world expects me to be,
Right.
not what I've always told I should be, but who I actually am and what feels right and good and authentic and appropriate to me. And something that I was actually thinking about this morning with the spark that is really um, continuing to help me and is bringing lots and lots of thinking and magic to me this morning. We have talked about how part of the role of being a spark to me is recognizing the role that you play as a spark. The spark is the beginning. It's it is the impetus for the possibility of change, but
Mhm.
it is not the one responsible for implementing the change. And
Mhm.
that is appropriate and necessary. It's necessary for the spark to play this particular role. Because, as we have talked about many times, when we try to force things on other people, when we try to force awareness, even when we are trying to be helpful and we're trying to do something that we feel is helpful for someone else, if we see a change that we think needs to take place and we try to make that change for someone else,
Mhm.
ultimately that gift is not an appropriate gift.
Right.
Um, Taking away the person's opportunity to make a positive change for themselves takes away the person's opportunity to exercise their personal power.
Huge, 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 huge.
And that is so huge. It's so huge. And that single concept has been monumentally transformative for me, because I think as part of this, the should and expectation concept, I felt that part of what I should be doing and what I was expected to be doing in order to be good was to do as much as I could for everyone else at
Mhm.
my own expense, right? To expend as much of my energy as possible for the sake of helping others. And in that mindset, I never felt like I was doing enough. And often I think when we're in that mindset and we go too far in helping other people or trying to help other people, we see that we're not actually helping them, right? We spend all of this energy, we put all of this effort and time into
Yes.
trying to help someone else. But because we have taken away that person's opportunity to make this change for themselves, to connect to their own personal power, the
Yes.
change doesn't last or it may not ever take hold. It has to be, in order for it to be truly appropriate and good for the other person, they have to contribute their own energy, their own intent, their own desire for change.
Mhm.
And they have to be the ones to actually make the change. We can't do that for them. And to
Yes.
me, that
Yes.
concept of recognizing your role in being a spark for others, you are not the whole kit and caboodle, right? You're not the spark and the flame and the transmutation and all of this.
Right.
If you try to do that, you are not actually giving them the gift that you're trying to give.
Yes.
The
Yes.
only appropriate gift that you can give in that circumstance is to be the spark.
Mhm.
They
Right.
have to do their side of
Yes.
the change. And that has freed me in so many ways from the should of inappropriate responsibility, feeling like I am responsible for doing the whole thing or for being this, giant change maker, this person who brings this massive amount of change, positive change for the world, myself. The best way that I can bring about change for others, for the world, for myself, is to be the spark.
Yeah.
And something that has been so helpful for me, one of the things I've been focusing on is who has been a spark for me? What has been a spark for me? How can I identify what a spark looks like and what a spark does and how that works? Because if I want to be that, I want to see concrete, real, I'm always looking for real, concrete examples and applications. And something amazing that I have discovered in looking for the sparks in my life is that really just about anything can be a spark.
Exactly.
Anything
Exactly.
can be a spark. And and often the people who have been the biggest sparks for me were not doing some giant thing. They weren't.
Yes.
And
Yes.
often what's really interesting to me, but not surprising, is it's often not even in their doing that I found the spark. Whatever
Yes.
they were doing was appropriate and good and positive and beneficial.
Yeah.
But what really was the spark for me was seeing their being. When they
That's
were
it.
being,
Key
when they
point.
were being their authentic selves, when they were
Yes.
just being,
Yes.
when they were being,
Yes.
that
Yes.
was what
Yes.
sparked something in
Yes.
me to make a
Yes.
transformative change. And that is one of the most freeing things I have found to date, I think,
Yes.
for allowing me to break out of should, to break away from
Yes.
expectation, to break away from I have to find some singular purpose in my life,
Yeah.
some doing that makes a huge difference for the world, or else I am not a good person. No. What I do is important because it's important to me, and I want to do things that are good and appropriate for me.
Yes.
But all that is really required to be a spark is to be, and to be
Yes.
you, to be
Yes.
you. Because
And to be
in
your moreness.
yes, and in the act of doing that, in the act of being your authentic self, being appropriate, being good for you, what is good and right for you, exemplifying that, embodying that, as we were saying earlier, in the act of being you, not what you should be, what you are
Exactly.
supposed to be, what you are expected to
Exactly.
be, but being you. That is the spark for others.
Yes. Yes.
And
So just for the person who commented, I agree. This is, yeah. They asked how to focus on yourself as a question. This is exactly what Erica Jane is now explaining. Please continue. Yeah. Just wanted to bring
okay.
them focus here.
So yeah, this has been a really, really transformative thing for me. And something this morning that I was thinking about and that has clicked something into place for me that has been hanging in the balance for such a long time. Something Sil and I talked about recently, I shared that I have felt for so long a disconnect between understanding something logically in the logical part of your brain and feeling that same thing.
Yes.
There are so many things, and I think this is probably a pretty universal experience for people who are on the journey and in the process of personal growth, of change, of transformation, that there are many things that we become aware of and that we understand logically.
Mhm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that we feel that way. We can
Exactly.
understand something, but not feel it.
Exactly. And it's
Or
very critical.
yeah, or we can have a new awareness that changes something logically for us, but it
Yep.
doesn't necessarily change the way we feel. And that was something that I have been focusing on so much lately is how do I bring those two together? How do I take something from an understanding to a belief, something that affects how I feel. And one of the things that has been an understanding for me for a very long time, but not necessarily a belief, is about my own value and worth in terms of my independence of being, in terms of existing separate from external validation. This concept that not receiving validation from others does not mean that I am not valuable, worthy on my own. Logically, I totally get that. From a feeling perspective, there was still a major disconnect of feeling like I needed external validation. I needed validation, appreciation from other people. I needed other people to see who I was and see my moreness and my goodness in order to feel that myself. And there was still this persistent disconnect of not knowing it, but not feeling it. And this concept of the spark and of other people needing to contribute their own personal power in order to create the actual change solidified something in my brain that has finally made me feel that I am valid, worthy, good on my own. Because what I was thinking this morning was that just like this concept of understanding our role as an appropriate spark and that we can go so far, we can be the spark, and then beyond that, whatever our spark is landing on has to choose to take that. They have to choose to take that spark and do something with it. And if they don't, then the change is not going to happen. We can't do that for them. We can't force that for them.
Yes. And they have to have the appropriate receptivity.
Right, right.
To accept that spark.
The same is true for people seeing our value and worth.
Exactly.
We can radiate goodness, moreness, all of the wonderful things that we have to offer to the world. We can be that spark. We can put that out there and shine that light on whatever we come into contact with. And the universe can play its role in setting the mood, setting the environment, setting the tone to allow us to be in the right place at the right time to shine and radiate that light onto something or someone that could benefit from that. But
trust.
In order for that, our spark, to be helpful to others, in order for a connection to form, in order for whatever you're looking for in this situation to occur, the other party has to be able to see your sparkness, and they have to choose to interact with that, to be a part of that transformation. And freedom of choice, it is the facing of the awful truth that freedom of choice exists in the world, right? This is a double-edged sword. It's great for us, freedom of choice. Yay, I have freedom of choice. But everybody else has freedom of choice too, and I can't make them agree with me. I can't make them believe the things that I believe. And that is true of how other people see us as well. I can't make someone else see me, appreciate me, value me. I can radiate. The universe can bring me into the most magical situations and bring people to me. But ultimately, that other party has to be able to see the value of the potential connection and then choose to do something with it.
Yes.
And if they don't, that's not my responsibility. I can't, if I tried to force that, it would be just like trying to force the gift of awareness or change on someone else.
Cannot.
It's not appropriate. It
Exactly.
cannot be appropriate. It cannot
Exactly.
happen.
Exactly.
So it is not my responsibility. It cannot be my responsibility
Yes.
to make other people like me, to make other people see who I am, to appreciate who I am. I can't force that, because if I did, it
Yes.
wouldn't be appropriate. And that's not my job. That's not my responsibility. And
Exactly. That's a huge point.
it is, and
is
it has
not
been
your
completely
responsibility.
transformative for me. Completely transformative.
Yeah, yeah. Huge deal. Huge deal. So we essentially, Erica, if I were to do somewhat of a summation takeaway here, that you are discussing the essential conundrum, the essential problem that is inherent with this idea, this belief that is around helping and
Yeah.
the should
Yeah.
of helping. Right?
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's a mess
It is.
because we are under such pressure to feel we should help. We should help. This is what makes you a good person. Yeah. But the problem is when you actually help, you aren't helping.
Yes.
So helping thus now in what you've explaining here, if you take it as a focus of being, right, it is shifted from a doing to a being.
Yes.
The only way you can really help truly when you think it through to the end, and we won't get into all the problems of helping and inappropriate application of of goodness and all of the other problems that come about it. But when you really focus on helping in the most appropriate way, you realize the only way you can truly help is by being your
Yes.
most,
100.
being your moreness, being your most appropriate self, being content with yourself, being happy with yourself, being joyful with yourself, having yourself together, having no qualms, no doubts about yourself. Not that you've got the answer to everything, but just that you are happy where you are at. You are enough and you are also more,
Yes.
right? So you're always in the space where you know there's more, but you are quite happy and solid and thrilled about your enoughness.
Yes.
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 And then that's when we can be a spark of being.
Right.
Right.
And I think,
And sorry, I just wanted to just add one more thing. And this is what I see in you and Sher.
oh, I love that.
Right?
I, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think,
I mean, you see it in Sher and Sher sees it in you. So,
yes, absolutely. And I
uh,
think a really key thing there for me that has helped me again with this concept of my purpose, seeing how I fit into the world, understanding how being me is good and can be good and helpful, truly helpful, is what you just said about recognizing that the most appropriate way to help, to truly help the world, the best gift
yeah.
that is really a gift that you can give to the world is to be yourself. That
Yes.
has also freed me to release the should, the old should belief around my doing.
Yes.
Because for me, I always thought that it was my doing that was helpful and that made me good. And
Yes.
so now that I have this new understanding that it is my being that makes me good, that
Yeah.
frees me to do
Yes. Yes.
whatever is right and good and appropriate for me.
Yes.
My
Yes.
my
Yes.
goodness, my contribution to the world is no longer tied to what I do. It is tied to who I am. So now I
Yes.
am free to do what feels right and good, what makes
Yes.
me happy, what
Yes.
brings me joy.
Yes.
The key
Yes.
is in the being.
Yes. Yes. And
So
what feels right to you, according to you, and particularly in this context, this is not an idle statement. It is what feels right to you in the complete context of you and your conscience,
Right.
and particularly your conscience in the context of impeccability.
Right.
In other words, you aren't just feeling right because, well, I'm indulging myself. I want to go around, I don't know, just taking whatever people have. And well, that feels right to me. I'm a predator. I can take what I want. No, it's about conscience, about impeccability, because you've thought it through. You've thought it through to the end, and you've really looked at it. You've researched it, explored it, multiple perspectives on it, and you're continually looking at it. So it's not an idle thing that you are doing, right? You are completely satisfied that you've done all of your due diligence when it comes to what feels right.
Right.
Yeah. These
Right.
aren't just casual things. They are very, 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 very seriously and a hard come by, very sober feelings of what feels right. It's not indulgence. It's a very important point. Yes.
Right. Absolutely.
To bring it full circle, we now have what you were saying about being yourself, being your moreness, and feeling what's right. This is very important. Now let's tie it back together to spark. Yeah, because yes, you've now laid out this wonderful, marvelous point that you've come to in the end of how to be and how to be appropriate and how to balance should and goodness and all of these things. And it's all wrapped up in you being you, you feeling your moreness, you feeling your rightness. However, when we now bring in this extra additional concept of spark, we say, I've thought through the problem of helping and inappropriate helping and inappropriate application of goodness and the conundrum of helping. I want to help, but if I help you, I take away your opportunity to learn for yourself. And that's one of the worst things we can ever do to anybody. So how do I help without helping? Really powerful conception there. To help without helping. Big problem. By being the spark. So when we tie it together, you being you means that you when you are being you in this conception, you need to radiate. Otherwise, that spark will only stay inside and will never be out there, right? And you can have all the sparks inside you. If you don't let them out, they're not going to spark anything. So radiance is the mechanism of putting your sparks out there, right? And it's radiance, not pushing. The sun doesn't push its rays on us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just radiates. Whether you receive it or not doesn't matter. What grows from it and how it gets used, totally irrelevant to the sun. The sun simply radiates. Right? It doesn't discriminate. It's up to you to use the sunlight as appropriate. But it's also up to the sun to actually radiate. Right? You could have this, great big thing where it's all internal and nothing leaks out of it. Yeah. And it's all this energy going inside, be like a black hole. Right. Nothing will come out of it. So, if we, which doesn't mean that we cannot be that way. You can be completely private. But for you, it is particularly important, and your focus of being and focus of self is particularly important to help. It's always been, or to be helpful. But yeah, the conundrum came in as we started to focus on appropriateness and particularly on should, to say, I realize this is deep pressure that I should be helpful. However, just because I see how I can be inappropriately helpful doesn't mean I don't want to contribute to the world.
Right.
Right. So you figured out, and all of this, we're putting it all together. We are saying, the way to balance your own desire of being, right, which is to enjoy yourself, enjoy your moreness, be at peace with yourself, and to feel what you understand, and to bring in how to be of usefulness, of value in an appropriate way, right? Which is another way of saying being helpful. Right? Yes. But it's a different way, because helpful has a connotation of doing something for somebody. But if you say, how can I be useful and valuable without infringing on people, without taking away their choices, their opportunities? How can I do this? By being the spark. Yeah? Because sometimes we are the tinder, we are the fuel, and all we need is that little spark to get things going, right? Absolutely. So this is magic. But again, if we go back to that focus of self, how to appropriately focus on self, we need to make that effort to be tender and be fuel and have all the appropriate elements in place, to be appropriately oxygenated and so on, right? Not to have too much draft and all the other things that are necessary if we want to set ourselves alight in the context of, connecting to our fire, our moreness, to be a sun, in other words.
Absolutely. Yeah? Absolutely. And that
up to us.
Idea of being the tinder that the other side of this equation, that being
Yes.
what my mom is referring to as the spark E, which I like, being
Yes.
the spark
Yes.
E, the
Yes.
tender, the
Yes.
part that provides and supplies personal power in
Exactly.
this equation, something that was
Exactly.
equally transformative for me in this whole concept was
Yes.
recognizing all of the times
Yes.
where I was the tinder. And
Yes.
in thinking back to, well, where, who are all of the people that have been sparks for me, or what has been a spark for me? Something that I realized that was so powerful for me, and going back to what we were saying in the beginning, helped me realize that I had been connecting to my personal power all along, and that personal power and strength did have an appropriate connection for me,
Yes.
was realizing that in every instance of a positive change, a positive transformation that has been made in my life, there has always been a spark. And the spark plays a critical role in this
Yes.
because it helped me connect to my personal power. But in every instance, it was not the spark that made the change in my life. It was me.
Yes.
It was me.
Yes. Yes.
My
Yes.
willingness, my choice to engage in that, to take the spark
Yes.
and
Yes.
add my personal power to that and choose to make a change,
Yes.
that's huge. That is huge for me as a
Yes.
person who historically has struggled to see how I could be seen as strong or
Yes.
powerful, or how, as someone who has struggled in the past to see how to connect to my personal power. It was
Yes.
hugely transformative to come to this realization that I have been connecting to my personal power all along. I just didn't see that that's what I was doing. The positive changes that we make in our lives, even though in some cases it may appear that other people made those changes, or that we recognize the role that the spark played. Oh, this person told me this thing and it made this huge change in my life. Yes, they were the spark, and that is awesome.
Yeah.
They played a very important role. But if it led to actual, tangible, real change for you, you made that change.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
You tapped into your personal power and you made that a reality.
Yes.
And that is
Yes.
huge.
Yes. Yes. And before we shift to connect this now full circle here to Sher, I just want to say, part of us being the tinder or the fuel is also not to be overly sensitive to sparks. In other words, you don't want to be gas, where a spark sets you off and you explode, right?
True.
In other words, you get triggered. So
Mhm.
on the other side, the sun radiates, but I've got to make sure I don't get sunburnt, or I don't get dehydrated, or I don't get shriveled, or, that's it. So I don't get dried out, whatever, right? So we have to use sparks appropriately, and that's on us, right? You cannot expect something like the sun to say, well, all right, you're a little bit sensitive to sunburn, I'm not going to shine on you. Seriously?
True.
But that's what people expect. They expect others to be aware of what particularly is going to trigger them and not to do so. Right?
Mhm.
So now what do you want? Do you want somebody to not put out sparks simply because a few people are going to be triggered by that? No, no, that's a terrible world to live in. That's where everybody shuts themselves down. And this is what has happened with earnest, good people, right? They've gone inside and they don't radiate. Yeah, the only ones who radiate are the freaking narcissists.
True.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So we're in an appropriate environment because of the sensitivity and this the shutting down of reception to sparks when it's inappropriate. But hey, sorry, no. If you're going to be, a liquid fuel that's easily sparked, sorry, that's on you. You need to resolve that. Don't expect those who have the sparks to bring this moreness, this magic to the world, to shut it down. It's like asking the sun to shut down. No, 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 no. And we need to be aware of that, right? So that we go out there and we be ourselves. That being is not a pushing, it's a radiance. If this is going to put you off, you're going to feel small because I'm enjoying myself and I'm happy, and you feel miserable because by contrast you're unhappy. Well, that's on you. Sorry. You know, you got to remedy that. You don't have to compare it to everything. Enjoy somebody being happy and say, wow, can I learn from this? Let it spark you, let it infuse you, let it motivate you, let it inspire you, right? To get out of this crappiness of hierarchy, in other words, right? So this is very, very key. The whole thing of should and how it connects to the superiority paradigm. Very, very big point. But before we go into whole long stories, I don't want to necessarily go there. I want to come back to Sher, right? So please, Sher, now you share where you're coming from and how all of this relates and connects to what's been going on with you, because lots of stuff's been going on with you also, right, Sher?
Oh yeah.
Magical stuff. Magical stuff.
But I had a couple of responses to what Erica shared so beautifully. First off, my first thought when you were sharing what a spark was, two words came to mind, and those two words were you're igniting inspiration.
Love
So
it.
that's what spark says to me, is igniter of inspiration. And especially when you were talking about your name, and I thought, okay, is she kidding me? She really doesn't see what she's doing here or what her name really is. Igniter of inspiration. So that's my take on that. And you know, when when you spoke about names, mine, if you don't, not the French interpretation, because that's, you know, my amour or love. But there's another, I believe it's Gaelic, meaning to my name, Sherry, which is keeper of the meadow.
Wow, brilliant.
So I thought, you know, when I learned that somewhere back, I don't know, as I'm in 20s, 30s, somewhere in there, and I thought, right, that's never going to happen. That's not me. Well, Charlie, you know, be careful what you say around the universe, right? But before I get to me, Erica, my other comment was, I had a question. How has this spark, how do you believe that it has affected your mood? To say you're in a feeling that you really do want to reach out, that you really do want to help something, that you really do want to make a difference, and you're just not feeling confident enough. So how do you incorporate this spark into that mood to help you shift away from the I can'ts or the I shoulds to I can?
Interesting.
I want to.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, first of all, I will say, I know that I don't know everything about being a spark. And
Yes.
I can never know everything about being a spark. So I will answer this question from where I am with this currently, because I am absolutely still learning, understanding, thinking through what it means to be a spark and how that translates to me. How can I be a spark? Not how can I be the same spark that other people have been, but how can I be my own interpretation of a spark? And I think for me, thinking about the connection to confidence, um, what really comes up is what I was saying earlier about this most recent revelation for me of sort of recognizing the appropriate role of a spark and the spark's responsibility in an equation that I, I think when I think about having the confidence to put your sparkness out there, or having a fear maybe on the other side that your spark is not enough, or that it's not what someone else is looking for, that connects to me again to this concept of should, feeling like you should be, wow, well, I have to be this particular kind of spark, or I have to do this particular thing. And what it really comes down to is, again, this external validation thing. At least for me, that's what comes up for me, is this external validation and the idea that I need to change how I am, who I am, in order to be an appropriate spark for this other person.
Yep.
And that again, if you go back to what I was saying earlier, that has been such a huge thing for me, like very recently, just as of this morning, coming to this recognition that really what that thought is rooted in, although I think in most cases this is not intentional on behalf of the person who's trying to be the spark, but when you really look at it, what that is rooted in is taking away the other person's freedom of choice. What you're
Mhm.
saying is, I want to be the spark for you, and doggone it, I am going to be a spark for you. So I am going to do everything I can to change who I am, how I would be a spark,
Yeah.
so that I will be effective for you because I am
Yes.
going to do this. And what that really does is take away the other person's freedom of choice to accept your sparkness.
Hmm.
And like I said, I think in so many cases, those of us who are trying to be good, who are trying to be helpful, do the right thing, that's not an intentional thing. We're not intentionally trying to take away someone else's choice, but when you really look at it, intentional or not, that is the result. When you try to force other people to accept you, to see you, to take some value from you, what you're really doing is you're taking away their choice
Right.
to accept that. And so for me, connecting that back to confidence and how do you say, okay, I want to be a spark, but I'm afraid that what I have isn't going to be enough, or how do I get confidence to go out and do it? Part of it for me is resetting our view of this need to be valuable to other people. What you have to offer in being exactly who you are, in your moreness, in your goodness, right? Being who you are as an impeccable person, as someone who has an intent to goodness, that is 100% enough. It is more, and it will help appropriately the people who are ready to receive it, the
Right.
people who are in the appropriate position to receive it. There is nothing that you need to change. If your intent is in the right place, if your intent is good, if you've thought this through, if this is right and good according to what you feel is beneficial, then there is nothing you need to change about how you are radiating your sparkness. You cannot force someone else to accept your spark. You cannot force someone else to learn and grow from your sparkness, to connect to their personal power and do something with that. And that is so freeing. Letting go of feeling a responsibility or playing a role in the entire transformation. Letting go of that and saying, no, my job is not to make this other person accept me, to make them see what I am or who I am, to make them see value. You release yourself from that inappropriate responsibility of, I need to be this particular way in order to be helpful to this person, or I have to have some particular quality that will make other people like me or see me. That's not your job. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to be you.
Yes.
And to me, that's all. That is where the confidence comes from, is, and as someone who has struggled with confidence for so much of my life, I can say for me, the confidence in being a spark, putting yourself out there, being different, being something other than what you feel you should be, what you've always been told you should be,
Hmm.
comes from recognizing that it is not your responsibility to make other people like you. And that's a statement I've always heard, but again, never necessarily felt in myself. And I think the key differentiator for me has been understanding that it's not just not your responsibility, right? You could say, well, that's not my responsibility, but I could still do it, right? Would it make me a better person if I did something even though it wasn't my responsibility? If I went above and beyond? No, it's not just that it's not your responsibility. It is actually inappropriate for
Yeah.
you to
Exactly.
take that on.
Yeah.
It is,
Because then
it
you're
is,
bordering on codependency.
yeah, yes, it is unhelpful for you to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
that on.
See,
It's
when I was
not
looking
just
at
that
Eric,
it's not your responsibility.
this whole spark idea, the whole idea of spark actually, to me, can be applied in so many different directions. It can be, we can look at it in the category of codependency, of narcissism, of
Exactly.
people being influences, even with writing as a survivor, because
Yes.
my intent was always to share, and that's how I started. That is how I started. But then it shifted because I had lost a spark. I had lost that little momentary spark, little, or even if you want to call them the little wispy whirly gig things that come off the dandelions, I don't know what they're called. Seeds. There you go. But I had lost that space, or that direction. And so my writing, it was just kind of all over the place. My sharing was all over the place. I couldn't find my direction, until I happened across the word, out of an alternative choice that I experienced. While I was on that road trip, should kept resonating in my head. The word should, because of something that had happened. And then several other things kept happening. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm beating myself up unnecessarily over messages from years ago. I should be this, I should be that, I should be more financially responsible, I should be more mature, I should know better by now, I should be able to handle standing in the same room as my narcissist. Who can? So, sorry, I'm a queen, but I'm not that big of a queen. So there's just all those shots. And then I got to looking at my writing and at my sharing, and I thought, whoa, wait. So I spoke with Sil about it, and because it was a big point of awareness for me that, wait a minute, I stepped away from sharing because now I'm telling. And when you talk about sparks, a spark doesn't tell, a spark just ignites.
Yes.
Just that little tiny flicker.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
Exactly.
Well, my writing used to ignite. My writing used to be a spark. And then somebody had gotten into my ear, and a few somebodies, and then my attention
got into your ear, not somebody. Should got in there.
should got into my ear, that I should be further along. I should be, influencing, but I should be this, I should be that. And I was really starting to just doubt myself, doubt my own ability.
Yes.
And lose my self-trust. And then when I really dug into it a couple of days ago, I found the root source of all that. And at the same time, I guess in some ways, finding my own spark again, when I told myself last night, David, I'm just going to start doing things the way I feel are appropriate for me.
Yay.
Yes. I did that.
So I sat down last night. I started tearing down all this stuff that I put time into working on, and taking it back down to what I want, to what is appropriate for me, for my writing, for my books, for the other book that's coming out, for the podcast, for all of it. Including making sure that I am reclaiming the Unbound name, because that's mine.
Yes, Sher, Unbound. Yes.
Right.
Actually, I need to do that something. So, yeah.
Okay. so yeah, that's, Erica, everything that you shared. It does remind me, and I have to share this. I really do. If I feel called to. Several years ago, I went to a conference. I took a whole group of youth, probably 12 of them, 12 teenagers, 2 adults, myself and one other, to a conference in Minnesota. And that in itself was kind of insane, to take that many teens in one trip. And we spent, I believe the conference was probably over a period of like 3 or 4 days. But it was an amazing one, because it was all about getting these teens to understand what their spark is. And the conference was called, it was What's Your Spark?
Wow, that's so cool.
So when Sil first shared with me about asking, it's like, oh, I wonder if it's the same concept, and it's real close to it. Basically, though, it was the idea of getting teens to understand that they have that something inside of them that can keep them motivated, that can help them with their moods, with regulating their moods, with um, planning out their future, with anything, you know. But their spark was their essence, and that's what I heard you describe. Is that your spark that you're talking about, which I'm sure you have like thousands of them inside, but it's like the essence of who we are.
Mhm.
Is that about a good sum for that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
So
Um,
capital T trust. Sorry, sure. Just real quick, right?
yeah.
A big, big, big issue. And, Erica, we've often teased you as being the titan of trust in way of invisibility because it's been such a huge topic. Here it comes with the spark. We need to trust our ability to discern sparks. You asked what discernment is once a while back, sure, and we've
Yeah, I did.
spoken a lot about it since, right? What
Yes.
exactly is discernment? Yeah, it's key. You enabled some sparks which and allowed them to come in when they weren't appropriate, right?
Right. Right.
Because in at least in my humble opinion, you didn't necessarily trust your own sensibility, your own moreness.
Exactly. I didn't. I
You
didn't.
didn't.
And I
Exactly.
think when we
Exactly.
reclaim that,
Exactly.
I
So
do believe that when we reclaim that, though, that's when we can actually start to
exactly.
spark our own trust again.
Exactly. And if we're going to take this analogy all the way, we have to understand that we're only looking for sparks when we cannot find that spark within.
Mhm.
Right? So it's not like, hey, you know what, I'm a fire and I'm running around looking for a spark. We don't want to be an oxygen personality, which just
Right.
combines with everything, right?
Right.
Oxygen actually as a chemical, I think Eric and I spoke about this a little bit, it combines with everything, right? So we don't want to be that. We want to be self-sufficient and be our own spark and our own tinder and our own fuel and our own oxygen and everything, all the elements, right? But
Yes.
sometimes we say, wow, my particular configuration right now, I'm building this fire, but I'm using potassium and manganese and all sorts of wonderful stuff. Wow, I need a particular spark because, well, I'm looking to burn underwater. I think manganese actually can burn underwater, by the way. It
Yes.
literally does. So I'm just saying, so when we have sometimes we can't find it ourselves, then we can open ourselves and be that. Or I say, look, I leave a little part of myself open. I'm going pretty happily, but I can always use that spark for more, right?
Mhm.
So it is though to appropriately pay attention to the sparks, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise, you can get either triggered or inflamed, or you can light up too much, or you can end up giving credence to sparks which are inappropriate, and that's
Right.
what happened in your case.
And
Right.
that actually reminds me, speaking of mood and kind of going back to that topic of the connection between spark and mood,
Yes.
um, something else that Syl and I discussed that was a really important part for me of sort of setting an intent behind being a spark and how to be a spark appropriately was the connection with mood and using your sparkness to affect your mood appropriately, to help you change your mood or shift your mood, but also to be aware that your spark can affect the mood around you. And
Yes.
so to include that as this intent behind your spark of mood management, of managing mood appropriately, because as you said, being a spark really connects deeply to you being you. And so it's, I think, important to be aware that when we're talking about being you, we're saying being you in the most appropriate, highest level of you, not necessarily, we have one of my favorite conceptions that Syl is always talking about is about our feelings being. I shifted the original statement, I think, to make it more understandable for myself, but the idea is our feelings are always valid but not always appropriate.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to keep in mind, that, if we allow our sparkness to be just a constant radiation of everything that we're feeling and thinking at all times without going through an appropriate filter,
Right.
then we might negatively affect the mood of those on whom our spark falls. So it's important to keep that in mind, that mood is a really important part of how you
Yes.
are and how you are being in the world.
Yes.
And something that we talked about this has been also a really transformative concept for me, was one of being not negative, and talking about how can you
In
cueing,
the context of obligation.
right, and
Maybe.
how can you be a spark? Well, we've talked about spark is really connected to being. Most of the time when something sparks someone else, it is the person's being, not necessarily their doing. And
Right.
part of your being, I think it's easy for us to get just as caught up in worrying about, well, how do I be, right? How do I be appropriately, as it is to get worried about how you can be appropriate in your doing. And that's been one of my favorite conceptions that we have talked about, is that really all that's required of you in your being is to not be negative.
Exactly. All
And
that's required. There's an emphasis on that required.
right. That's all that's required. There's always more. You can always go beyond that. But the minimum level of requirement for your being is to not be negative. And I have had so many inappropriate associations with the concept of positivity in my life. I absolutely see the potential existence of toxic positivity. There absolutely, for me, is such a thing as toxic positivity.
Yes.
And
There's
that to me is such an important distinction, that being not negative does not mean that you are toxically positive, that you are going around trying to force positivity on other people, that you're seeing things through rose-colored glasses. No.
Yeah. Don't be that grinder in life that goes around grinding and showering of sparks all over the show, right?
Exactly. It is not a forcing of positivity on other people.
Exactly.
It is
Right.
being not negative in however that resonates with you, right? However that resonates with you, being not negative. And to me, that is a key aspect of mood management when it comes to being a spark. Because if you are basing your being and your sparkness on the minimum basic intent of being not negative, then whatever you are radiating is going to be appropriate.
And it's bonus.
Guys,
It's
but
bonus. It's bonus.
But I do want to, I guess I just want to ask, are you saying then that, never mind, what is your definition of not negative? That's the better question. That's the better way, because otherwise I feel like if we're telling people, you can't be negative, then that could be kind of confusing with, well, I can't be positive 100% of the time, because we're all human. We're going to have those days when we just really don't want to spark. We don't want to function. We don't want to do anything.
Right. So for me, and I would be really curious to hear both of your answers on what you think not negative means as well. For me, a really important part of learning about being not negative and this whole concept of sort of charge, our personal charge, is that it is absolutely appropriate to feel what you feel. If you are feeling sad, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling any of these feelings that we tend to be told have some particular association with negativity, it does not mean don't feel those things. Don't you dare be sad.
Being negative, right?
Right. Don't you dare be sad, because that could be really negative for other people. It is not that. It is not, there is not an association there of not feeling what you feel. But for me, kind of going back to what Sil was saying about being mindful of the sparks that you're taking in and not letting, things that inappropriate sparks light you on fire.
Yeah.
A huge part of what I recently came to understand has to do with sort of appropriate positivity. Is
Okay. Better
I
word.
I have thought when I think about positivity and being positive or being not negative, my brain immediately goes to what you are radiating out, right? What you're putting out into the world.
Mhm.
But a huge part of that for me is also being mindful of what you are bringing in
Yes.
and how understanding how your perception of external things that you are bringing in can affect your internal charge.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that to me, being not negative really at its core means thinking things through,
To
thinking
the
through all of the external things that come in and affect everything for us internally, thinking those things through to the point that we perceive them, we react appropriately to them, we feel whatever we need to feel, but we don't allow those external influences to change our charge.
Right. Okay.
yes. Yes.
If
Yeah.
you if you refuse to allow your internal charge to be negative, if you
Yeah.
refuse to allow that internal charge to be anything but not negative,
Yeah.
then you can experience external stimulus. You can feel, you can
Yeah.
think, you can experience all these things without them affecting who you are at your core, your charge. And I
Hmm.
Yes.
think that is the key to me. Being not negative is
Yes.
protecting your charge.
Yes. Yes. We could say negative, positive, reframe them as evolutionary or devolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now we take a look at sadness, right? I'm feeling sad for whatever reason. And I'm experiencing my sadness as a very real, authentic, genuine feeling, right? And does this now, if we look at it very, very closely, right, particularly with sadness, I can experience it in such a way that it's evolutionary or devolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big difference. It may be very, very subtle, but one I'm pulling down, I'm going onto a downward spiral, and I'm going further and further down. The other, I'm I'm understanding, I'm discerning, I'm appreciating in it, in the other sense of the word, appreciating, figuring out, discerning the world through my sadness, right? I'm being cognizant of the moreness of the world and the appropriateness and balance and everything. It's an expression of my goodness, not of my misery. Yes, I might not enjoy my sadness, but it's an expression of my goodness. Or on the downward devolutionary spiral, it's an expression of my misery and hopelessness and giving up, etc. Right?
Right.
Okay.
One is I'm saying I would like the world to be a better place, and I'm sad that it's not. The other, I'm saying the world is a messed up, terrible, horrible place, and I don't want to be in it, etc.
Right.
Right? To exaggerate. So it's not the experience itself; it's the underlying intent behind the experience, the overall connectivity of it, where you are at. Is it evolutionary or devolutionary? We can define a positive and negative in that context, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
many so-called negative experiences can be profoundly evolutionary.
Right.
Depression, you'd think, wow, depression is probably one of the worst, but no, we can learn tremendous amounts from depression. Yes,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah. It all depends on how we do things, not what we do.
Right.
Right.
And I
Right.
think this reminds me of another thing that was really profound for me in this discussion of positivity and negativity and being not negative. Something Sil shared was that when we are struggling to find positivity, that really to me the idea of your personal charge is this really root, deep connection to who you are. It goes deeper than emotions, than feelings and thoughts. It is this root part of who
Yeah.
you are. And that is the part that you are really trying to protect, is that the core of who you are
Mhm.
is not negative. That's what you want to maintain. And what Sil shared with me a long time ago that I continually go back to when I'm struggling to connect with this resolute non-negativity is that ultimately one one of the most core expressions of positivity is choosing to live. Because despite all of the, I mean, we could be experiencing complete turmoil in our lives and
Mhm.
experiencing lots of sadness, grief, anger, any of these things. But below all of that, if we are still choosing to be here, then what we're really saying is, I'm choosing to believe that there's still a possibility of change.
Mhm.
There's still more. There is more out there for me to
Yes.
connect to. And that
Yep.
is this resolute positivity, that it doesn't have to be some grand gesture of positivity. It doesn't have to be taking everything you see and turning it into some positive or looking at it in a positive way. Positivity can literally just be choosing to wake up the next day and say, I'm still here.
Yes.
That is being not negative. And that
Exactly.
is a core
Exactly.
part of who we are and how we are
Yeah.
in the world.
Huge. Huge. So Erica asked the reverse question. She asked, "Oh, how do I define positivity?" Right? Remember, Erica?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I said, positivity is an expectation that the future is going to be okay.
Right. Right.
Not necessarily better, or might even be slightly worse than now. But if now is like really, really awesome, and I expect the future to be a little less awesome, it's still good, right? It's still okay. So that's just positivity, an expectation of okayness or goodness, whatever level or degree of goodness. This is what we're expecting it to be, right? This is positivity. Yeah. So, negativity could, you also, when you look at it in its more things, to not to be negative is not to be destructive. Again, not to be devolutionary, not to make things less than.
Mhm.
And part of that is to pay attention to what you cannot undo,
Mm-hmm.
right? So any action that you can't undo, well, those are very difficult. And that's why murder is such a big deal, because you can't undo it. Yeah. That's why it's like the worst of all crimes. So, when you're looking at your actions in this context also, do they add to the world? Do they subtract from the world? Do they make it worse, better, at least in your understanding of this? Now, again, this is about beingness, not actions. Actions become a whole other ball of wax. And now we are looking at an entirely different discussion. We are simply looking at things in its most basic. Yes. Am I being a sun, which stuff grows, weeds grow, dandelions grow, lotus grows, everything grows, right? Life is dependent on the sun. And this is a magical thing. So I, in my own little universe, can be a mini sun that simply exudes the radiance. Yes. Now, that radiance sometimes, can grow weeds. Okay, so be it. But doesn't matter. Weeds contribute to the overall life cycle, right? So when we are looking at positivity and negativity, we can say, if you say positivity is sunlight, then negativity is the absence of sunlight,
I love that.
Mm.
right? So, there's no real neutrality when it comes to sunlight. I suppose you can be foggy, you can be gray, I suppose. Yeah. But, are you toxic? Are you a weed killer? Are you poison? Those are all the opposites also of sunlight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that.
It's one of those questions like the judge in the famous pornography case with Penthouse, where he said, he was asked to define pornography. He says, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Mm.
Right? Very famous quote by the judge in that case. Very early freedom of speech case, big deal case, right? Anyway, so that's it. He said, look, I can't define it necessarily, but I know it when I see it. And if you've been on Facebook or public stuff long, you know it when you see it. So same thing with negativity. We know it when we see it. Yes, it's not that hard to spot. And to me, the key really is the intent underlying. That's it. If I'm being sad or miserable and my intent is to put this on everybody and spread it around, well, that's pretty negative. Or my internal intent is to basically implode and go less than and all this stuff and, get involved in stuff like self-pity and all this. This again, I know what's going on. And if I look at my own intent and why I'm doing things, it changes it very, very quickly, right? In terms of when you are being positive or negative. Yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Easy to recognize when we pay attention to intent. Sorry, go ahead, Sher, please.
Oh, I was just going to ask Erica and you, so I wanted to talk about solutions to replace.
Yes. I've been holding it. So go ahead.
Solutions to replace should. A spark is one of them, but I know there's more out there. There's always more than one way to approach any dilemma. So
yes. I mean, quite literally, I when I really do have to use should, which is very seldom, I say ought instead of should. But even that, it still has all of those connotations. So for me, the more appropriate and more joyful, more fun replacements is I want, I desire, I'd like to, I intend. Yes.
Yeah.
That changes the whole game. Instead of saying, oh, you should. Well, okay, put it from somebody else's point of view now. I don't even want to be telling somebody they should. So if I'm looking for a replacement for should, no, I'm doing something that's inappropriate in the first place, right? So I can only really talk about it in my own personal context. But let's say for argument's sake, I'm writing a story or whatever. I'm doing something where I need to do this. I can ask, what would you like to do? What is appropriate for you? And when we start to replace should with appropriateness, now there is the ultimate synonym. Right? Instead of should I do it? Is this appropriate to do?
Right
there.
That's why I like the statement instead of I should be. I have been thinking strongly and writing more like last night and today with I can be.
Exactly. And I can be, there's a question, what? And immediately, the what is not what you should be, but what is appropriate for you. Right?
Exactly.
So when we replace should with appropriate, everything changes. As a matter of fact, you can pretty much replace anything that's a default with appropriateness and it all changes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, so you touched on a really important aspect of the concept of appropriateness. For me, something that was really transformational for me, this whole idea of appropriateness in relation to should, for sure, was the main differentiator, I think, for me in being able to initially shift out of this place of feeling all this pressure around should and sort of separate should from goodness. That, this concept of sort of inappropriate obedience and I should be this, that means that I'm good. To be able to separate that out, appropriate was such a powerful concept for me. And so what you touched on that was really big for me was kind of, again, going back to this idea of inappropriate helping. Something that I always tried to do was to figure out what I thought was going to be appropriate for someone else, right? I would adjust whatever should meant to me in a particular situation according to what I thought someone else wanted me to be, or what I thought someone else thought was right or good. And I
Right.
would adjust accordingly. And what I have definitely come to understand through my own personal process of learning and growth has been the only thing I can know for certain about appropriateness is what is appropriate for me. Everyone has their own sense of what is right and good and appropriate for them according to their own experiences.
Yes.
We only experience this world through our filters, through our lenses, through our
Yeah.
perception. And so
Mhm.
to attempt to assume that we know or can discern what is appropriate for someone else is inherently flawed for me, because in my experience, because I can only definitively say, truly definitively say, what is appropriate for me, because
Right.
I'm only experiencing the world through my filters and perception. And so that has freed me so much from the concept of should, that to try to change yourself or adjust who you are or how you are according to what you think other people think is appropriate is never going to work, really. In the end, it's never going to be appropriate fully for you, because they are experiencing the world through their own filters
Mhm.
and perception. And what might be appropriate and right and good for them may not be appropriate and right and good for you, because you're experiencing the world in
Exactly.
a completely different way through a completely different perspective, and
Yep.
vice versa. So, appropriate should, this whole concept of appropriateness and should, really only applies in your perspective. You are the only one who can definitively say what is appropriate for you. And others are the only people that can definitively say what is appropriate for them.
Right. Right. And then that way too, I feel like, Erica, that also really helps a person say in my situation with PTSD from all of the years of abuse. When I look at it in that concept or in that particular light that you just shared, it really does help take away any the it closes the door on having shame for not being enough. Does
Right.
that make sense to you? Okay.
Yes.
Because otherwise, I mean, that was one of the things that brought me to this whole focus this last week or so was having shame for not. I was experiencing feeling shame, thinking I was not enough. I was listening to the inner critic, listening to and experiencing resistance to words even such as deserve. That I deserve to be good. Well, like I wrote yesterday, I was taught only good girls deserve good things.
Yes.
Well, if we're telling our children, and I'm going to kind of lean off a little bit here, but if we're telling our children as parents, grandparents, whatever, that they always have to be more instead of giving them the choice to be more, we're telling them the thing that I was being told, which is you're only good enough if you do this. Should you decide to change, should you do this, should you do that, then I'm going to approve, then I'm going to appreciate you. And when we get those messages and we're told those enough, frequently enough, we lose our self-esteem. We do become codependent or narcissistic.
Yes.
So I know those are two completely different extremes, but those are the biggest ones that can pop off the top of my head.
Right.
So shame to me, carrying a bag of shit is like carrying a bag of shame or shit, or both, or
Yes.
all of it. It really is.
Absolutely.
It's one of the worst
Absolutely.
things that I feel like we could do with ourselves. But there was something big that I wanted to say at the beginning of this. I had asked the question, how do we become aware of our own unawareness surrounding this topic? And I have one word I believe anyways, I felt really excited when it came to me. That one word answer could be sharing. This is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
is we're sharing your information, sharing your takeaways, your perspectives. Syl's doing the same. And
Right.
I just want to tell you too, I have packed pages of notes right now.
Yes, yes, yes,
I love it.
yes. Well, you wanted an awesome guest, and I said to you, you'll
Yeah,
get an awesome guest. So,
yeah, but I mean,
so
just
yes,
the idea
yes. And
of,
Eric has been awesome too.
but I mean, just the idea of
Well,
course, I heard that, Syl. That was funny. Um, but I mean,
at least somebody got my joke. Sorry, Sher, we're enjoying my own little stupid
no,
joke
I got
here.
it.
And
I got
you
it.
talked away. Yeah, sorry. We just being knuckleheads. Go ahead. Say again what you're saying. I just wanted to get more focus on what you're saying. Sorry, Sher.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
what I was just saying is I had asked originally about, how do we be aware of what we're aware of? And we do that through sharing. We do that through
Yes.
sharing and asking our
Yes.
questions of things that we don't
Yes.
understand.
Yes.
Always looking for the more. And
Yes.
there's more than one definition to more. More doesn't have to be more of something. More could be further expanded upon. But I mean, just sharing about radiance, sharing about embodying that radiance, and being able to also expand on it. Um, Sharing about what's positive and negative, our different perspectives and takes. And to me, to be told that you should present your information in this way for you to become successful, or any of those shoulds that we hear, whether it's in business or in parenting, or even as teens, there's going to be teens that listen to this podcast as well. Just to have anybody tell you that you should be, do, or think something,
Yes.
as long as you're aware that you don't have to,
Yep.
think that should, you're not taking anybody's shit. So
Yes.
Right.
I don't know how else to put that.
And Cher, I think that to me, what you just said connects so much to how I personally have experienced one of the ways that I have experienced becoming aware of my own unawareness is the idea of other options,
Yeah.
other choices. Because for me, that's one of the biggest ways that I think I experience my own unawareness and become aware of it. I mean, the saying goes, we don't know what we don't know, and that can be one of the hardest things to identify. But for me, some of the best times where I have become aware of my unawareness is when I experience something that, or see something or perceive something that I thought was impossible.
Right.
Yes.
When something comes along in my life and embodies the other, embodies the fact that there are other choices than those that we perceived, that there are other options, there are other ways to be.
Right.
That shows me, wow, okay, I was not aware that there was another choice here. Here is something that I had no idea existed. And yet here's this person being this totally other option, embodying
telling.
something different. Right.
Right. They're not telling. And that's the great big difference. That was,
they're just being, they are just being another choice, another option. They're showing you, they're sharing their otherness. And that to me that has been one of the most effective ways for me to see my own unawareness, and to, I think, becoming aware of your own unawareness can be a really scary concept for people, right? We don't like the idea of not knowing everything because we're told that we're supposed to know everything.
yes.
But to me, that's one of the most beautiful ways to become aware of your unawareness, is when you see there's another choice, there's another option, there's always another choice. That's exciting. Then it becomes exciting to be unaware.
But it was scary. I mean, I know I did that after my attempt. What was it now? 3 years ago now, coming January, 3 years. Wow. Yeah. Anniversary date. But that excitement that you were talking about, being aware that there's something more
Mm.
other than being angry and negative. That's why I asked specifically, what's your take on negative? Because, you know, my take on negative was you you just get so tired of being sick and tired, you
Mhm.
know, and you it's this vibe that you carry. It's just this whole there's no feeling, there's no anything. But then the flip side of that, a positive, for me would be that being positive is accepting, just acknowledging the awareness, acknowledgement, and accepting that that's a part of you. You just don't have to, you don't have to always express it all out there. You can just be with it, just like you just said. Just be and just accept and be cool with it.
Right.
Um, because then we're not being like a narcissist or a codependent, which both types of people tell.
Right. Right.
And I had a very, very hard time. This is something I really haven't shared with Celia yet either. I had a difficult time determining, oh my gosh, well, am I leaning more towards narcissistic traits, or am I still deliberate, or am I still working with, you know, getting out of codependency?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
both will tell, both want to. One has the intent of control, the other one has the intent, well, they both control.
Right. Right. Yes, absolutely.
There's not a lot of difference there.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to get shot down for saying that, but that's okay. I know what's up here. I know what I'm thinking and feeling. So I'm going to zip it on that right now. I want to hear more from you about what your thoughts are on that.
Well,
All right.
I think what you
Perfect.
just said too, I will, yeah, I will make this very brief and I want to hear what Sil says, but what you just said about, again, going back to this idea of what is positivity, what is negativity, what does that mean, and how do you marry that with your feelings, and you know, how can I feel angry but still be positive? One of the core, I remember one of the first things that Sil said, when we first started working together, that really grabbed me and made me want to hear more was, I think the way you phrased this, Sil, was something along the lines of, if there was one thing that I could tell my younger self, or that I could tell, you know, young people today, it would be that there's always another option.
Yes.
And that to me is appropriate positivity.
Yeah.
It is not negating or ignoring
Yeah.
the difficulty that you're experiencing right now. It's not invalidating the difficulty that you're going through, but it is maintaining and insisting that there is always another option. Even if I can't see it right now,
There is.
trust that there is another option out there that I just can't see yet.
Exactly.
That's appropriate positivity to
And
me.
that right there, in effect, is an awareness of our unawareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you
Yeah,
think it through.
absolutely.
Wow, there is another option. I have no clue what the hell it is, but I know it's there,
Right.
which means I'm maintaining an awareness that I'm unaware of this particular option. Now I've got to go look for it. I've got to find it.
Yeah.
The question now is how.
Right.
Well, that's what I did ask. So how?
Right. So you know, how to become aware of unawareness. So, you know, I use that black hole analogy. How did they come to know that black holes exist? Because you can't see a black hole. You can't measure a black hole. They noticed it by its effect, by implication, by consequence, right? They saw, well, there are no stars in that spot in the sky, and all the stars around it are kind of spiraling, and eventually they disappear. Well, okay, I can't see the black hole, but I can see the effects of the black hole. I can see the implications involved. So we can look at our lives and look at it in the context of implication and consequence, and do some reverse engineering to say, I don't know what there is, what's exactly there, but I know there's something there. If I find that I'm limping and I know my foot is anesthetized, Well, it's sort of maybe very likely that I've got a stone in my shoe. I'm unaware of the exactness, but I can see the consequence. Maybe not the best of analogies, but it gives the idea, right? So we can look at consequence. I'm trying to make something a bit more physical, but more real to look at consequence, right? And that stuff that you can't see. Gas is actually, gases that like carbon dioxide, too much carbon dioxide, you're getting all sleepy and all that. You can't see it, you can't smell it, but you can notice it by its consequence.
Mhm.
So, it's one of the things, that's why that's a very necessary alarm. People have smoke detectors and they only have smoke detectors for smoke, but you want a carbon dioxide detector too because of this, right? So if you do put in smoke detectors, make sure it can also detect excess carbon dioxide. Yeah. Anyway, just by the by, little PSA in there. It's a big point though. All right, so now we look and we go a little bit further, we go deeper, particularly in the context of our bigger context, which is, of course, we have impeccability. We have all these marvelous tools that we can use. What is one of the main focuses right from the get-go, beside clarity of intent, which is massive, right? And clarity of intent, because it's such a beam of light, it tends to shine on what's going on around you, and it tends to elucidate unawareness automatically, right? Because but that's not where I'm going, but I'm just going to elaborate a little bit here. Because when I know what I want, when I have clarity of intent, and I understand what I'm focused on, what I want, where I'm going, it automatically connects my brain to things that are pertinent and relevant,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me aware of what I would otherwise be unaware of, right? But there's extra magic. I don't want to just be aware of everything. I don't need to be aware of, exactly how many specks of dust are sitting on the left wing of the fly on my ceiling. Not necessary, right? So it's pertinence and relevance. Yes, I want to be aware, but I want to be aware of what I'm unaware of, but yet that which is pertinent and relevant to me. Now, when I say pertinent and relevant, that is a very conditional statement, right? So obviously, pertinence and relevance applies to things like my survival. We all have natural instincts that keep us alert, and that will, when we get those clues and signs and hints of stuff and changes, like I'm walking in the jungle and it goes quiet and all the birds are quiet and, everything. Oh, well, it must be a tiger around or a lion. Okay. Again, I can't see it, but it's implication, right? So we have mechanisms for noticing stuff that happens. One of those is change in pattern, right? A mechanism, a tool for becoming aware of what we are unaware of, change in pattern, yes? And like I said, the other thing is to have this connectivity of clarity of intent. Now, I'm very clear about my intent to stay alive. Of course, if I'm walking in the jungle, I'm in my own happy bubble, and I'm not particularly connected to my survival, well, lion comes, pounce, gobble, okay, end of me, because I wasn't alert, and I wasn't connected, and I wasn't paying attention, and I didn't hear all the warning signs, right? I didn't notice the change in pattern, and so too bad, right? So we need to stay connected to that which is of importance to us, our intent, like survival. Now, you would think this would be something that's a duh that we are always connected to, but hey, anybody who's ever done any hunting or observed nature will see the things that forget about being alert get eaten, right? That's it. So we need to be constantly alert. Now, we don't want to get into hyper alertness and hyper vigilance, which, sure, in your context of dealing with people in severe trauma, like abuse situations, that's all they become aware of, right? They simply live moment to avoid abuse. And that's not the way to live either. So we need balance, capital B, balance. Yes, I want to enjoy smelling the roses, but I want to do so and pay attention to all the beauty around me, right? Deliberately. It's about deliberate awareness. If I'm deliberately aware, and particularly being deliberately aware to all of the magic and the mourners around me, if I'm walking down that path in the forest and I'm being deliberately aware of all of the magic around me, I'm going to notice the tiger lurking in amongst that magic, am I not?
True.
See? So that looks very cute on you, those daisies, tiger, but I'm going to enjoy it from up here in the tree. Thank you very much. Right? So we can, in other words, have a strategy, Here's where I'm coming to, right? Have strategy for being aware and not being inappropriately aware of things that we would be unaware of. In other words, being hyper-focused on survival, right? So we've
Right.
shifted it to a focus on beauty and enjoyment, but in the context of having this 360 awareness, right? So we want this awareness of moreness. If I'm constantly aware of the moreness around me, I'm also going to be aware of the lessness. Yeah, comes with the territory. But if I'm only focused on the lessness, as in that hypervigilance of abuse, I'm not connecting to the moreness, and it's a very miserable existence. Same thing with the person who's completely anxious and stressful and worried, walking through the jungle. Oh my God, the tiger's going to eat you. But of course, they're exuding fear, and the next thing, well, that's tiger smell the fear and eat you. So you actually create your the very reality that you don't want. So just for all the worry pots out there, be aware that you often create the very thing that you don't want, right? So you're responsible. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
so talking about positivity and negativity, worry and anxiety is a massive exudance of negativity, which actually, as it's, the negative consequence, you part of your own problem, in other words. So just on a little bit of a aside. Now we come to another major issue. So we've got a couple of techniques here already now, but another major technique or tool for dealing with unawareness is to pay attention to habit.
What
Yes,
we're
Mhm.
habit. So we've got clarity of intent, which makes for pertinence and relevance. And, through that pertinence, your brain is fired to connect to the things that are pertinent and relevant. So you notice the stuff, right? So this is a massive, awesome technique for not just being aware of what you're unaware of, because like I said, we don't want to be aware of all the nonsense, but things that are pertinent and relevant to you. And this is fantastic. So when we have a clarity of intent, okay, I want to survive, I want to evolve, I want to enjoy beauty, I want to experience my moreness, etc. Be very clear about your intents. Yeah. And then all the pertinence and relevance will come your way. Very simple. So in other words, we learn to live deliberately, and all of our tools that we have, way of impeccability, your dictionary power, all that stuff. These are the tools for deliberate living. Yes. Now, deliberate living, we take this one step further. We now get to the absence of habit. Deliberate living is in the absence of habit, because isn't habit a deliberate intent to deliberately be unaware?
Yes.
You know what a habit is, right? A little
Yeah.
convoluted when I say it like that, but habit is essentially when we have set an intent to be unaware, right? To do things automatically. Now,
Yeah.
that can be very useful in certain instances, saves a lot of time, energy, etc., but also ridiculously dangerous. As any
Mhm.
hunter will tell you, the way they catch their prey is to understand their habits.
True.
So me personally, I don't care to be prey for anything, right? Now, I
Mm.
might not be prey for the actual literal tiger or lion or whatever, but I can be prey to foolishness. I can be prey to indulgence. I can be prey to unawareness, right? So I don't want to do that. Yes. So this is a very powerful thing. Now, let's go really sophisticated here and say, I'm going to use habit to make me more aware. I'm going to use the very thing that is contributing to me being unaware to actually make me aware of unawareness. Yeah. So this is what we did. We set this intent to take the daily little routines and habits, like how you stir your coffee and which way you tie your shoes, which arm you put through your sweater first, right? All of those trivial little things that we do without awareness, to do them deliberately, right? Thereby breaking the pattern of doing them unawarely. Now, this is only step one. It's very important to realize it's only step one. So because those habits are something we do throughout the day and they sort of always there, once you set that intent to just change them, not undo them, because I can't stop stirring my coffee or brushing my hair or whatever, but to do them differently, to do them with a little bit more deliberateness, that's step one. I've now used something that's always there to stimulate me to be more aware. Then I use that moment when I'm stirring my coffee the other way around. I don't want to just be always spending all my day focused on changing my routines, but I now associate that moment when I become aware of my habit. I associate it, I tie it, I connect it with the things that I wish to bring into awareness, which otherwise fade from awareness, like being more discerning, being anticipating, and being patient, being joyful, feeling my moreness, feeling my understandings, right? Living deliberately, etc., etc. All of the magical tools that I have in the Dictionary of Power, and those are substantial lists, right? It's not just a few little things. There's a lot that we want to be doing that adds so much magic. There's always this moreness. So we use habit to actually basically undo habit and to add in new power habits, which a power habit is something which happens automatically, but not in unawareness.
Okay.
Yes, in our definition here. A power habit, yes, it happens automatically, it happens organically, it happens innately, it comes appropriately, but not without me losing my awareness. So I'm now in the habit of tying all my little mindless routines that I had before and making my mindlessness, I'm transforming it and shifting it through this profound strategy into mindfulness. Yes. And because of association, I'm now using mindlessness to become mindful of moreness. We've got a triple M going here. Yes.
Like it.
Yeah, I'm using mindlessness to become mindful of morenessness. Yes. How cool is that? How cool is that? So to answer your question here, one of the most profound techniques of dealing with unawareness is to manage our habits in conjunction with clarity of intent. Those two right there is powerful. Now, we add in a fourth technique here. Well, I don't know how many, I don't know where we're on the list here. But when we include the habits of self-talk, oh my goodness. Yes. How many times haven't we said, I'm such a numbskull or I'm such a worry pot? Well, that's a habit. We don't think twice about it. We just take it for granted. But when we really pay attention to this, what are we unaware of? We're unaware of the consequences of such statements, right?
Yes.
And those statements lock us into this mindless loop, which we don't want. So when we start to pay attention to the habit of how we say things, automatically, oh my goodness, how many times have you not asked a question and you say, oh, why did I do that? How many people truly answer those questions? It's like, what was I thinking? Right? You hear this all the time, right? Answer that question. It's a habit. It's just a mindless habit. Your subconscious is literally telling you out of the very words of your mouth, be aware, be aware, be aware. There's something you're unaware of. Hello, wake up, wake up. And it's having this whole great big panic attack there. You're actually saying the question. What was I thinking? And your subconscious is, come on, answer the question, Oh, not again. Your poor subconscious, really, it suffers, right? Because you never answer the damn question, and yet you ask it all the time. So answer your own rhetorical questions. It is a profound technique for becoming aware of what you're unaware of. Yeah. And further, if you want to get a little bit sophisticated, pay attention to what you tell other people as advice.
Exactly.
Because 10 to 1, it's your awareness trying to make you aware of what you need to know about yourself. Right?
But how many times, and I've answered this, I've seen this meme and I've seen other people talking about this question. How many times in a day do we ask ourselves WTF?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Exactly. And you know what I mean about WTF without having
Oh yeah. All right.
Oh yeah.
So where's the foolishness?
I probably utter that question to myself. I'm guessing, I don't know, on an average of 100 times a day. And I'm going to start answering it. I promise I'm going to start answering it. I have a feeling that that's really going to, that's kind of like, that's in some ways the equivalent of the question you had posed to me yesterday that I recommended that I start asking myself is, what am I doing? So, I'm guessing anyways, but yeah, just stop and ask ourselves, what are we doing? What am I doing? Most helpful.
Exactly. That was my next profound technique. Every time you change that habit, you say, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm stirring my coffee clockwise. Well, I'm stir it anti-clockwise. Okay, I've got the spoon facing me or away from me. Okay, what am I actually doing? That's not what we mean when we say, what am I doing? That's only in the very tiniest application of doing. We want to go bigger. What am I doing in the, oh, I'm being unaware again. I'm in a habit. Yes. What am I doing? Oh, I'm basically not just kind of mindlessly feeling. I'm not even choosing. I'm just like existing. Oh, what am I doing? I'm associating habit with moreness. Oh, what am I doing? That's right. I'm deliberately choosing my mood. Holy crap. Wow. Wow. I didn't know I could do that. What the F? It's like, whoa, seriously? I can choose my mood? Wow. So that's what I'm doing. I'm mood choosing. Never mind mood managing. I'm mood choosing. Wow. Power, power, power. This is awesome stuff. So this question of what am I doing? It's a capital D doing, yes, which includes being. I want to be a spark. I want to radiate. That's what I'm doing. I'm radiating. Oh, wow. I remember now. Thank you very much. Okay, brilliant. That's what I'm doing. I'm radiating. I'm being. I'm experiencing my moreness. I'm feeling my moreness, which is always enough, no matter how little it is.
Mm-hmm.
Erica, how many times?
Let me repeat that. That's a really, really cool thing that I just said there. And I just like, wow, that's very cool stuff. My moreness is always enough, no matter how little my moreness is. Yes?
Amen.
My moreness is always enough, no matter how little it is. It's the same thing with impeccability. It's always enough, no matter how little it is, right? Your personal power, when you trust your personal power, it's always enough, right? And you'll be impeccable. So this is very cool, but this point of moreness, it's not about being special or wonderful. No, it's always enough, no matter how little it is. The very fact that you exist means there you have some moreness, right? The very fact you exist means you have moreness. Existence equal moreness. End of story. This is the starting point. If you exist, you have moreness. How you use that moreness, that's a whole different question. Yes?
Yes. And that's why they come to see you in the program for Wave Impeccability is a place to start. So I'm going to put that plug in there for you. And before we sign off, because I know Erica's going to have to go and I know I have to get on with the rest of this day. But Erica, I've got a question for you. The next time your husband asks you, what are you doing? Is there any chance you can respond to him, I'm sparkling?
I love that.
Yes.
I am going to incorporate that into my, and it is so funny because hearing you both talk about this, I am thinking about how many numerous times during the day I ask myself, what am I doing? What was I just doing? So this is a perfect opportunity for me to just, I love that answer. I am sparkling.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Yes. And really key, right, in this context, to understand the difference between what am I doing? I'm radiating.
Mm-hmm.
Not exuding radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Small difference. You asked it, positive, negative, right?
Yeah.
Radiance and radiation right there gives you a very, very, very accurate understanding of the difference between positivity and negativity, right?
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I love the implication behind I am sparkling or I am radiating.
Yes.
That it is unhooking from this inappropriate, from should, and from the inappropriate feeling of needing to be doing something, to be productive in order to be helpful.
Thank you for that.
I am being, dang it. I am radiating. That's what I'm doing right now. I am being.
See, and when I'm doing, I'm sharing. And if I'm not sharing, well, then I'm just going to be.
Yes.
And that's okay. That is totally okay. Because I've never really allowed myself to just be.
I'm right there with you, sister. So we're, from now on, we are radiating. That's what we're doing.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go.
Oh, wait, when somebody asks us what we do for a living, we radiate.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I'm a radiating writer. There you go.
So, when we made those Native American names, I forget what I came up with, but something like radiance dancing on grace. Right?
That's cool.
So, because it was, the sparkling sparkling stream. So I said, kind of put it in that format. To me, it was always, it has a particular style. So I said, what did I say initially? I forget.
First, you said fire dancing on water.
Ah,
And this is a really nice bringing this around full circle that I talked in the very beginning about feeling disconnected from my name. And part of what I was trying to do was connect to my name. And believe it or not, in this discussion with Spark, that has brought me a really beautiful connection with my name that, we talked about Erica means strength, and we talked about that being this sort of fire. And my middle name, Jane, means grace. And Syl and I have talked many times about how dance is the balance between strength and grace. So Syl sort of transformed that name from fire dancing on water to fire dancing with grace, I think. And so for me, that brings a really beautiful new connection for me to my name, that my given name has a really beautiful connotation of radiating and radiating with grace.
Oh, there you go.
I love that. That is my new aspiration of what I intend for myself to be, is to radiate with grace.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What a
Wait,
perfect-
I got a name for you too, Sher.
What's that?
Look at the subtitle names there.
Well, we've got Syl and Sparkled. We have Fire Dances with Grace, and we have Sher Unbound.
Yeah. And sparkled is something that it comes from externally. See? In other words, I'm lit up by you guys as sparkliness.
Thank you.
I'm sparkled, like I'm ensorcelled. Isn't that the same word, right? So I'm just all the sparkness. I'm sparkled. So I'm making up a new word, which I really like that new word, right?
So do I. It's Sparkled. I like that. That's a good one. Oh my goodness. Well, you guys, we should probably hop off here.
No. You can't go after it. Okay. And you see your name?
No, all I see is,
I love that.
Intent Grace's Morness. That's beautiful.
Okay. So I was also contemplating to say intent graces heaven, if you now really to get poetic, right? But then, all right, so I said, well, right, I'll just keep it a bit more. Yeah.
I really like that though.
Here comes intent graces mornings. You see, you've got to make the name that you can say, here comes, you see. So here comes fire dances with grace, you see. That's why the dashes are there.
Yes, I like that. Intent Grace's Morness. That's true. True. Hey, I've got my book that I am unbound after 100 days of intent. And actually, it took me more than 100 days. 100 days was just the initial start. I mean, that was a drop in the bucket.
Yes.
100 days
More like 100 weeks.
It kind of feels that way.
Yes, because it was like a whole year, more or less, to get to the point, and it's been a year since you published it. So we're roughly at 100 weeks now.
Yes, we are. Absolutely, we are. And and I have to tell you guys too, just when I wrote it, I had already come so far. Just writing and the publishing it, there was just massive changes. But it almost seems as though those changes were just, they grew exponentially over this past year, especially in the past, I'm going to say probably 3 months. I have just, things have just really, really changed and rolled over for me. But I don't like the word change. I want to say that they have really, there's another word for developed. There's a moreness. That's all I can say, is that there has been moreness just every single day. And a lot of it is because I'm actually allowing myself the time to think about, I'm actually giving myself that time and that opportunity to think about everything that comes to me, that I read, that I absorb, that I hear others say. And then my own thoughts, giving myself a lot of time for my own thoughts. So that it did, when I'm already started on book 2. And
brilliant.
I don't have a title for it yet, but for whatever reason, That name right there, Intent Graces Mornis, that might have something to do with it, but also
Yes.
the name sunny, cloudy with a chance of sunshine kind of keeps coming up to me as
Same
well.
thing. Same
Oh,
thing.
love that.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that name, like always, I don't know, I must have some weird little part in my brain or something, like people have musical drawing talent. Well, okay, I got a naming talent.
Yeah.
It's connected, sure. Whenever I do these, I look at them and I'm like, wow. I truly, I'm surprised myself. It connects to your question that you asked in group, the post you made.
Yes.
What was
Yep.
the post? What was the post? What was the question?
The question was, is 2 seconds here. Let me see if I can remember. It had to do with is unawareness an excuse, or is it an opportunity to give ourselves grace?
There you go.
I love
Right?
that.
So is unawareness an excuse? At least, you kind of combine stuff, you let stuff sort of implied there. Is
Right.
our unawareness an excuse for our crappiness in the past? Or
Right.
is it an opportunity to say, whoa, you know what? I can't be beating myself up for being an unaware nincompoop. I have to accept this and shift it into grace. In
Yes.
other words, I remember back to being a baby, right? Or at least to my sibling when she was a baby. If I remember the crap, I said, she was always pooping herself, and that's a terrible way to remember. She was unaware; she didn't know what to do, and she just had to change her diapers, and it was horrible. Or
Right.
I can remember this beautiful baby that was beautiful in its innocent unawareness, right? Grace. Yeah. So how we utilize, how we choose to utilize, connect to, relate to, understand. Unawareness is the difference between the poop and the grace. Yes.
I love it.
Yeah. So now this is my point here. Look at that name, intent, and Sher's intent. Right. Sher has a deep, profound intent to move out of her unawareness. And
Yes.
this intent thus graces Sher's mourners.
Mhm.
Right, Erica?
Absolutely.
It's not an idle name. It's not just a cute, cool sounding name. It's a
No.
name that means something. I don't just, it's not randomly. It comes, I bring everything, that is all involved there to bear in that name. Yeah. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yes. I mean, of course, use it or lose it as you choose. But I'm just saying, it didn't come about idly. Yeah. Your intent absolutely not only graces your own mourners, but mine also.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right, Erica?
Yes. Absolutely.
Sher's intent graces mourners in general, not just our own. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
transform it, set the intent to use your unawareness to grace mourners, is my point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. You guys,
Brilliant.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Super pleasure. We'll do it again, right?
What's that?
So we'll do it again, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to. This was absolutely amazing. I learned so much today, just not just about myself, but about two people who are very important to me in my life. That, it's always so neat when we can get these glimpses, these inside glimpses of people that are important to us. So,
Me
and
And when we get to share and enjoy
that's
and
it.
and experience radiance,
Yeah.
both figuratively and in certain instances, point to the picture here, literally.
Literally.
Thank you, universe. It's a great big beam of radiance coming right across you there. How perfect is that?
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
What magic, what magic, what magic, what magic. Yes. Going right to your heart there, Erica. See? Your
Yep.
heart connecting to the universe. How brilliant is that in the radiance?
Love it.
Yeah. And that's what happens when we radiate. Sorry,
And
by the way.
well, I was just going to say too, to anybody who's watching or listening, I'm sorry that I did not respond to any questions. I had assigned that to Phil just because I could see the Facebook screen. But so thank you for everybody who participated and listened in. And yes, we will do this again.
So we only have one unfinished question, but it's okay. I'll chat to Norma about it in group. So it's more of a comment than a question. So we only had the one sort of a question, really. So no problem. Yeah. Was Sher talking about young children or teenagers?
Was I talking about young children? Both.
Both.
Young
Both,
children.
Norma. Both.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. But we'll respond to it in chat, the comments. So, okay. I love it, and I love you both. You're just two awesome, marvelous sparkles
Both
of
too.
brilliance and moreness. Yes, I love it. All right. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, now we're going to end all of this. There we go.